Hello, everyone! It's Saturday, and we're gonna have our fourth and possibly, for now, final session on the How to Write an Essay series, where we just compile everything we've gone over the last 3 weeks and finally get to the actual act of writing. As is tradition, I am Samuel. I am your friendly internet uncle that wants to help you get into philosophy, and that involves reading and writing essays. Basically, short texts in which we express, analyze, compare, study a single core idea. This core idea we express in statements. Some of these statements will be premises. One of them will be the conclusion, which is the main claim we wish to ascertain or hold, or try to convince other people that is truthful, factual, valid, useful, interesting, and so on, depending on our particular intent in the essay. We've also gone over on a very basic general idea of what an argument is, how arguments are different from arguing or argumentation. We have taken arguing to mean like the process in real time, usually in a socially embedded setting. While the argument is the end result, a solidified textual construct in which the premises and the conclusion are laid as clearly as possible in simple statements, and there is something we call inferential nexus to signal that there is a cognitive process that goes from the premises to the conclusion, such that the truth or factual nature, or you prefer the epistemic value of the conclusion, rests upon the premises. And in the strongest, in a cognitive sense of the word, in informational too, the strongest type of argument is one that if the premises are true, notice the if, then the conclusion must necessarily be true. We've also gone over some rudimentary practices on how to quote, how to do research, where to find sources, and the importance of sourcing as a social practice, because it allows us to avoid doing accidental or intentional plagiarism. Don't do either. And because it inserts our texts in a broader web of cultural practices and knowledge production. Hello, Rupert. Rupert is present. And I also presented this document, which is a format document. It's a very simple structure on how to do very basic essays, which we're going to use today to write an write an actual essay. Sorry for that. So, the essay we're going to write about today the explicit premise, or not premise, sorry, the explicit prompt or the topic we're going to deal today is AI tools should not be used in educational spaces. That is the conclusion or our main thesis or the main point we want to cover. So we will be looking for research and creating arguments to reach this conclusion. Before we get to the actual meat of the argument of the essay proper, let's date this. Today is April 25, so we're gonna use not American time format because the American time format fucking sucks. So it's 25 the day of the month, January, February, April, third month. No, March and April, so it's fourth month of the year 2026. Name shall be unchanged for privacy purposes. And I'm gonna show you a glimpse of the general material I have collected for this throughout the week. Sadly, I have not fully read all of it. The main one caught my attention, and I've gone over it, and it led me to a bit of a research hole where the bibliography it consults is also really good. So I started reading the bibliography for that and so on. But one, doesn't matter because one, we're doing it for fun, and two, a lot of the core point is going to be carried by things I already know. So I can rest on a lot of past expertise doing my points. That being said, I do have a lot, and we're going to go... we're not going to read 200 pages of research today. That's just not possible. But we're going to go over some select quotes and some other points that are going to help us build our case. So let me show you a glimpse. Oh no, it's not on the thing. Okay, yeah, got the thing. Let me pause the ambient audio. And let's go over to our first source, which I got from the news. Also, I'm a bit anxious about showing my browser. I really hope my really embarrassing porn won't show up. And not just my really embarrassing porn, but the really embarrassing porn that my friends post. So if you see pregnant My Hero Academia yaoi, it's not my fault, okay? Just pretend you didn't see it. Anyways, I saw several news articles reporting on this study. So I thought it was a good as any place to, start reading, start messing around. Let's hit one of those reports. And I start with this to show the importance of science communication in society. How we should have more news about scientific studies and advancements. Because that's just like a free way to get people interested and have them check out articles and research programs that go criminally underviewed. So, let's hit it. And yes, I know these are American rags, but what can you do?
I recently wrote a story entitled ChatGPT may be eroding critical thinking skills, according to a new MIT study. Natalia, you are the main author of this study. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about your research. So let me ask sort of the biggest question that is on a lot of people's minds was, does your study provide evidence that ChatGPT is making us dumber?
No. I'm so happy you asked, and you can see my excitement, I guess. We have like a huge FAQ on website right now. The words like dumb, brain rot. So all of those words are pure clickbait because we in our study never use this vocabulary, and we do not show this. And we actually cannot show this with even this setup. It's just impossible. What we have shown is specifically what happens, neural connectivity, essay outputs, scoring, interviews. We put it all into perspective, and there are definitely a lot of interesting things happening.
Can you briefly describe the study?
We invited 54 participants who were all students from Greater Boston University, and we invited them to come in person to the lab. And we asked them to do one very specific task, which is essay writing. And we divided them in 3 groups. So first group.
Get it? Get it? The task is essay writing, which is what they're doing. I did a thing. I think, where it's like fractals. It repeats. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Was tasked to only use ChatGPT. So they couldn't use anything else, just ChatGPT to write their essay. Second, search engine without AI functionality. So basically you can do like a classic OG search engine. And then the third one, we call it tools free tools, which is no tools. And we also call it in the paper brain only because of that. So you only could have used your brain to write your essay.
The research began with 3 essay writing sessions where students were able to pick writing prompts they were interested in.
So what we have observed during their first 3 sessions is that their essays were pretty homogeneous for their LLM group. So basically what it means in layman terms is they were very similar. Wording that was used, for example, a lot of specific words that were used, like names and persons, different entities, could have definitely observed this.
The researchers studied neural activity using a non-invasive brain imaging technique called EEG.
And then, of course, when we looked at neural connectivity, we also saw that there is actually a change when you use tools like search engine or LLM versus when you don't use any tools at all, which is in itself actually should not be very surprising, right? And a lot of studies before us actually explored this phenomena even earlier, not with LLMs, but with the tools we already had, like GPS or Google, etc. So what we saw is that there is definitely some scaling down happening when you are moving from no tools, meaning like you're only using your brain, up to all the way to the LLM. So, you have pretty high neural connectivity happening brain only, intermediate for search, and then definitely lower for the LLM.
The researchers found that of the 3 groups, the ChatGPT users had the lowest brain engagement and consistently underperformed at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels. Over the course of several months, the ChatGPT users got lazier with each subsequent essay, often resorting to copy and paste. After the 3rd session, researchers re-invited participants back for a 4th time. About a third of the original 54 participated, so it was a smaller sample size. But the students were reassigned to different groups. For instance, the students that wrote with their brain only were given ChatGPT, and the students that had used ChatGPT were now not allowed to use it.
And additionally, we actually let the subjects pick up from their essays that were not new to them, but actually the essays they had already written about. So something you have already written from those previous 3 sessions. So that was an experiment.
The results of this switch showed something surprising. The people who had been in the brain-only sessions for the first 3 essays performed even higher with ChatGPT.
So we actually, in the end, being, again, very careful with any speculations, do say the timing of introduction might be extremely interesting and potentially important to explore in any future studies. Can you tell me a little bit about that and why that might be actually potentially optimistic for, LLM usage? What happens, and it might be actually sounding also very natural for everyone, you used your brain to execute on the task once, 2 times, 3 times, And the fourth time, right, you now have additional tool to use on that very same task. So basically, hey, now that you have the tool, you have potentially more opportunities to ask the right questions, because guess what? You spent your time thinking about it without a tool. I honestly feel like that in our society we are losing a bit this opportunity. Think before you speak, or like think before you repost, or think before you post, right? So that might be just about it. Hey, do it yourself first, right? And then use the tool, and the tool can potentially maybe augment your output, your product, your use case, whatever you are going for, right?
Does your study show evidence that ChatGPT may erode critical thinking?
It doesn't show this directly, right? We really do not want to claim strong, oh, critical thinking is gone here, because again, limitations of the study. It's a preprint, and where we have very few participants in a rather specific task, essay writing. It's literally in the title. However, what I do want to mention that we of course looked what other researchers before us reported on. We needed to put it in some perspective and connect some dots. And again, this is what we found with our study, but again, there are other papers that talk that in some use cases it might actually support some of that. Like even in our case, we say, hey, timing might be important, right? It is really, to be seen and to be tested. More data is needed.
Yeah, so given the limitations of your study, why did you feel it was so important to put it out before, preprint?
With this unprecedented speed of release of these tools in all aspects of our lives, education, workspace, etc., in 4 to 12 months, right, where reviews usually take place, some actually couldn't take up to 2 years. It might be just late. We will end up with some, GPT kindergarten, some other things without proper data. So why do we need to move very fast and break things so fast in our own backyard when let's just
Oh, whoops! I had my microphone off. Okay, so I want to stop there because when she says "move fast and break things," she is strongly criticizing that slogan as part of Silicon Valley tech bro culture. Move fast, break things is an explicit mantra of disruption markets. Basically, we don't have time to make calculated studies for long-term use or impact. What matters is sequestering the market as fast as possible. So do that. Move fast, break things. And she's saying, no, actually. So I really like the epistemological attitudes this lady has, because notice that she said she's being very humble with the results of her study. She's saying there are limitations. No, we cannot actually claim this. What we have are interesting points of data. And we can have some conclusions, but they are not absolute conclusions. They are limited to a very specific set of replicable events, tests, and so on and so on. But what she wants, very explicitly, is to draw attention to this. She says, look, there is the possibility of a real danger, of real cognitive harm. So instead of moving fast and breaking things, let's do science. Let's study this. Let's try to understand what's going on. Anyways, let's move on. Let's continue.
Actually explore this, right? Let's have more data. And super secret, it doesn't even need to be brain data, right? Let's just test it. Hey, without, does it make a difference? Does it make a change? And more importantly, include all opinions that would matter. In this case, teachers, educators. caretakers. If you're talking about children, where I think it would be so critical, because we all know those brains are developing. So why do we need to rush these deployments, right? Let's maybe pause, evaluate, and there might be excellent use cases. This technology is not going anywhere.
Okay, so her general goal. Okay, Rupert saying, I talked to an uncle that's a middle school director recently, and I got to hear the horrifying real life cases of cognitive decline and social decomposition that iPad parenting and now LLM usage have caused. Yes, so we have a lot of anecdotal data. Lots of teachers are posting online about, man, what's going on? The kids, they just don't seem to learn. They don't know. They don't have certain basic skills. We don't know what's going on. And I think it's really cool that some people are trying to make actual science to find out what's going on, not just anecdotes. Not to diminish the value of anecdotes. Like, I'm not saying that, I mean, look, at this point, we have hundreds, thousands of teachers wondering what the hell is going on. That's anomalous. That's not just, oh, back in my day, all the people used to be smarter and no, that's not what's going on. Rupert says, her way of conveying information and message is awesome, though. So yeah. That's why science communication is a thing. It's a real career, something that we desperately need more of. Anyways, so because I saw this on the news, I was like, okay, let's check out the work. And you can see this is in a website called brainonllm.com. You can see lots of links. And this is basically the preprint summary. And this is the main page. Yeah, helpless anecdoting from people who are unequipped to deal with any of it and continue to flounder from limited state funding. Yeah, because I'm not blaming a middle school teacher that is only paid 8,000 pesos per month to handle a class of 40-something teenagers to do this. Like, it's obviously not their fault. That's why I insist that I am not diminishing or blaming or saying anything it's lacking about their anecdotal evidence. It's important, but it's also equally important in order to make like a powerful, solid policy choice, to have like an actual methodical scientific study done, so we can be more precise into what's actually going on. Anyways, so this is like the main page where they explain a bit of what's going on. I'm gonna read some of it. Yeah, we gotta expand the conversation, and that's low-key what I'm trying to do here today. I mean, the main goal today is just to get us to write an essay, and using a social encounter, all of us together, develop some skills on how to write essays. It just so happens that the choice subject of the essay is self-referential. It's an essay about how not to use AI, so-called AI, for essays. So I am, as we say in Mexico, taking the water to my mill twice over. With today's wide adoption of LLM products like ChatGPT from OpenAI, humans and businesses engage and use LLMs on a daily basis. LLM, in case anyone on chat doesn't know, stands for Large Language Model, which is a subtype of a programming tool known as machine learning. Like any other tool, it carries its own set of advantages and limitations. This study focuses on finding out the cognitive cost of using an LLM in the educational context of writing an essay. So, in this sentence, they are narrowing down the scope. They are telling you, we are just focusing on what happens when you use an LLM in an educational context, and even more specifically, when it comes to writing an essay. Are there more uses? Yes. Will we say anything about that? Who knows? Maybe some of the results can be generalized, but that is not for this study to find out. We assigned participants to 3 groups: LLM group, search engine group, brain-only group, where each participant used a designated tool or no tool in the latter to write an essay. We conducted 3 sessions with the same group assignment. Basically, this is something mentioned in the interview. And then in the 4th session, they switch. The sample group is really small, but they are not doing statistics. As we'll see, their argument does not rely on the number of participants. It relies on brain monitoring. We use electroencephalography to record participants' brains activity in order to assess their cognitive engagement and cognitive load, and to gain a deeper understanding of neural activations during the essay writing task. We perform NLP analysis. I think that stands for neuro-linguistical programming. Let me check. No, natural language processing. Yeah, I was worried for a second because the other NLP is a bit of a quack thing. And we interviewed each participant after each session. We performed scoring with the help from the human teachers and an AI judge, a specifically built AI agent. Mostly for irony, because this judge was biased in favor of other AI. We discovered consistent homogeneity across the named entities, recognitions, engrams, ontology of topics within each group. This is part of the NLP analysis. EEG analysis presented robust evidence that LLM, search engine, and brain-only groups had significantly different neural connectivity patterns, reflecting divergent cognitive strategies. Brain connectivity systematically scaled down with the amount of external support. Again, not a very surprising result. The brain-only group exhibited the strongest, widest ranging networks. Search engine group showed intermediate engagement, and LLM assistance elicited the weakest overall coupling. So the resulting part, the surprising part of this is not that you use less brain connections, the less work you do. The surprising part is the reverse. That by checking which parts use the less brain, we can see which tools have the most offloading. So the result from this is not that LLM make you use less brain. It's that you use the less brain, therefore LLM has the most cognitive offloading. It is the one that does the most things for you. In session 4, LLM to brain participants showed weaker neural connectivity and under engagement of alpha and beta networks. And the brain to LLM participants demonstrated higher memory recall and re-engagement of widespread occipitoparietal and prefrontal nodes, likely supporting the visual processing similar to the one frequently perceived in the search engine group. The reported ownership The reported ownership of LLM group essays in the interviews was low. What does that mean? Your sense of ownership, in Marxist terms, is the opposite of feeling alienated. The more you say, hey, I did this, I can see my work reflected on this, I produce a change in the world and this is the result, the more ownership you feel over that thing, the less alienation you feel. So when we're talking about ownership, we're talking about authorial ownership, not a sense of possession. The search engine group had strong ownership, but lesser than the brain-only group. The LLM group also fell behind in their ability to quote from the essays they wrote just minutes prior. Notice that the previous results are about brain activity. This is a behavioral conclusion. This is a very different thing because as we're engaged in this essay, we're going to have to deal with the problem of the brain and the mind. Brain activity does not necessarily imply mental activity. The opposite might be stronger. Like, I think mental activity always implies brain activity, but it's debatable. Anyways, I'm not going to solve that. I'm just going to mention that's a problem that we're going to face constantly here. As the educational impact of LLM use only begins to settle with the general population in this preliminary study, we demonstrate the pressing matter to explore further any potential changes in learning skills based on the results of our study. So they are not going for the sensationalist, LLMs make you stupid, which is both yellow journalism and ableist. Their goal is to raise a warning flag. Like, hey, we need to study this more. This is risky. The use of LLM had a measurable impact in our participants, and while the benefits were initially apparent, as we demonstrated over the course of 4 sessions, which took place over 4 months, the LLM group's participants performed worse than their counterparts in their brain-only group at all levels: neural, linguistic, and scoring. We hope this study serves as a preliminary guide to encourage better understanding of the cognitive and practical impacts of AI on learning environments. Okay, so that's a lot of new words. A very common one that's going to appear constantly is cognitive. What the hell is a cognitive? Let's keep that in mind. Rupert says, every time I start procrastinating and avoiding work, I feel my brain swarm with a landfill of bullshit thoughts. When I get working, things feel like they flow more, which is pretty subjective, but might mean something. I mean, that is not something we can make like science of, or at least not in a way that I know of. But that doesn't mean it's not valid. That doesn't mean it's not useful. Cognitive structuring leading to states of flow and enjoyment are important parts of learning. Anyways, so this is more about the limitations. It's press coverage, okay, whatever, and that's basically the introduction to this study. This is the same thing. So the FAQ, the frequently asked questions. I just want to bring this up because I think it's really cool. Is it safe to say that LLMs are, in essence, making us dumber? Sorry for that. No! Thank you. So one thing we want to do in our essay is not use any of these qualitative terms. We're not talking about intelligence. Remember my translation over the perverse ontology of stats? Very similar lines. We're not going to use any of these words or qualitative terms. We are only going to talk about things we can measure. So we are not going to say that LLMs make you stupid or lazy or whatever. We're only going to use a very specific language to talk about things that can be measured. And the popular notion of intelligence, as we went over in that translation, is not something that can be measured. Intelligence is not a scalar. IQ is bullshit. Okay, and that's pretty much it. You can find the essay on, like, it's linked there in preprint. It's not an essay, sorry. It's a study, and it's a chunker with over 200 pages. Now, a lot of the pages, and I think the bulk of them, are figures and methodology, which are really important if we want to do neurology, but we're not neurologists. I did a once over of this, and I have some parts that I have highlighted. Let me see if I can find one. Oh, okay, but in the context of making an essay, like this is the introduction. I noticed that, okay, there's a good introductory text, but they say with clear and unambiguous language, this is what we're going to do here. Where you explain what you want to do. In this essay, I will. See? Even the pros write like this. So don't feel ashamed about writing in simple, clear style. Anyways. Let me find the first. Okay, so a core part of this study is the following. How do we measure cognitive processing? How do we measure the internal operations that a human being does while they analyze, compare, deduct, infer, and so on? All of those mental processes, which we call cognition. How do you measure that? Well, turns out that you can't. Not really. You need at least a theory or an explanation to say, hey, these processes, we can see them and measure them. Not really. Not, at least not at this point. We cannot see or measure the cognitive act by itself. So what they do is a less descriptive but more measurable process, which is, okay, I cannot measure or see the actual thoughts, but I can measure the cognitive load. And I can measure this load by the amount of connections, neural connections that form, the amount of neural activity, measured in terms of neuron activations. Insert monkey neuron activation meme here. And try to establish a correlation. It may sound straightforward, but the idea that the more you use your brain, the more you think, is not free. That is something you need to expand or justify in some way. So they are saying, okay, we are explicitly using this theory to measure and guide our study. And as a conclusion, LLM users experience lower cognitive load. That is a measurable thing. Does that mean that LLM users are stupid? No. That's a different thing. In order to do that, you will need to establish a direct causation between cognitive load and so-called intelligence. But that does not exist. So, what we can measure is, again, the amount of connections, the amount of activity, the amount of measurable brain changes. The rest of the paragraph might help us later, but just an example of the kind of interesting findings they got. What else we got? We have some posts I've made about AI and stuff. One of the best things about writing essays is engaging in self-plagiarism, which is using previous writings to expand past ideas or insights and just help you write better. I'm a fan of self-plagiarism, and I strongly recommend people use microblogging sites or social media or diaries or whatever and just write things. They don't need to be good, but you can later expand them. So this is the source for this essay, and we have things I found from the bibliography of this work. Most of them are linked in the bibliography of this. Other articles and essays about this subject. This is just about AI stuff. This is the link to the Vygotsky archive in Marxist.org. Lev Vygotsky is a legendary Soviet pedagogist with a really interesting and successful model of learning. And here I have a presentation made by someone to introduce to their students about what is AI. Okay, so we have a lot of texts to serve as our premises. We have done some research. We can expand the research if we want to, but I think we have more than enough to complete the exercise we're going to do today. So let's go back to the text. And let me start again with the ambient music. Okay, so we have done some readings, we have sources, we have the intended conclusion. What do we do? Okay, we have this structure. I'm gonna first insert a page break here. It was the first one. To keep that works-cited stuff now. Okay, and I can delete this now because it has its own space, so, and I have an idea of what the bibliography and consulted work part does. Okay, so this is our intended conclusion. So we're gonna put it in the conclusion part. It's fine, Setter, don't worry. Your sleep and your work are important. Okay, so we have research and we have a conclusion. How do we build a bridge from what we have to where we want to get? Since we're starting from a hypothetical conclusion, from a hypothesis, we can do some backwards reasoning. Okay, what do I need to show that this is true? And before doing that, I always ask myself, okay, what does this mean? I know, Sarah, I mean, the job itself can get fucked. Your sleep is important. I think your sleep is more important than my streams. But the important part of your job is not the job. The important part of your job is the money. Okay, so what does this mean? Before engaging in a task of finding evidence to back up this conclusion, let's make sure we understand what we want to say. And we do this, and this is my ultimate secret technique, through something called logical analysis. We are going to break down this sentence into its constituent parts until the end sentences are so simple and so clear, we can fully understand what we want to say. So, first of all, AI tools. What are those? Should not. I am making a moral claim. How do I prove, or how do I argue a moral claim from factual evidence? Which is an enormous philosophical problem. Educational spaces. Again, we ask, what are those? At least the part of used is simple enough. We know what using ChatGPT implies. It means any use whatsoever. Okay, so let's start with the simplest part. Educational spaces. By educational spaces, I mean social spaces dedicated to the education of human beings, starting from childhood. No, like starting from early maternity all the way to postgraduate studies. This also includes non-obligatory educational spaces such as extracurricular classes, social hobby groups, or self-directed learning. So when I say educational spaces, I mean all educational spaces, not just some. So I'm starting to break down the conclusion into its constituent parts. But now, I need to do the same again with an even longer sentence. The sentence might be longer, but it is less complex. It uses more digested notions and concepts. Of this sentence, what is the most problematic part? What is the part that you feel has the least explanation? Which is the part that your brain says, oh, I need to, like, something is not clear enough here? No one in chat has any intuitions or feelings or just vibes? Which part of this sentence does chat feel is not clear enough? Or which part do they understand? Setter's just brain fucked. Okay, Setter, I'm sorry. You don't need to participate if you don't want to. Okay, the obvious bait here is that I use the term I'm trying to break down in the definition. That's bad. You don't introduce the term you want to break down into the definition because then you're just arguing in a circle. So we need to undo this. Yep. So we want to talk about any education of human beings. Okay, so now we have avoided the main problem of definitions, that a circular definition where we introduce the term we want to analyze into the definition, which leads us to an endless circle of definition analysis. So, good. Okay, so we have broken down this term into saying that educational spaces are a type of social spaces. Okay, but what is a social space? A social space is an environment, not something defined by purely physical, spatial extension. Though, of course, that is necessary. A social space is a reconfiguration of otherwise ordinary extension into a place with cultural intent and meaning. Example: library is a type of social space. A library is not just a building filled with books. The organization of such a space includes outreach programs, a set of rules and expectations, services rendered, all of these things made explicit through cultural signifiers. Okay? Now, the other part I struggled with in this analysis is education. What do we mean by education? That is the guiding question of pedagogy. What is education? And so, fuck it. Just checking in on, okay, let's try to get a decent enough definition to make this. We're not going to solve the problem of pedagogy in this essay. Education is the process of learning. I don't know, because that would just reduce education to learning. And I think education is a very specific type of or process of learning. I say that education is the guided process of learning. Fucking around and finding out is a process of learning. but I would not call that education. I think education is the thing that humans invented so that our process of learning does not rely solely upon fucking around and finding out. Education is a social and political activity. Okay, Sarah, go ahead and try. Okay, Sarah, we're waiting. We'll wait for Sarah. Let's do the thing where we are not claiming to have solved thing. Education is a vast and complex aspect of humans, not just human, of que no. Central field of pedagogy tries to solve this problem and achieve. It's not a problem, I mean, has tried in multiple attempts, multiple ways to reach a definition of education. We do not claim to have solved this, but we do need a notion simple that is both simple and effective to read. This essay. Okay, Setter says, following a set of rules or being given enough information that will allow the educated to bypass or avoid problematic or wrong outcomes in the subject. That is not wrong, but your definition carries a normative claim. Basically, it is saying that education has a goal. It has an intent. It has a purpose, which is to help people avoid problems. The problem with that definition is that some forms of knowledge, like, say, pure mathematics, seem to be outside that scope. Rupert says, it's a process done individually or collectively, ideally collective for a variety of reasons, as it's been the case since the beginning of history. As a fellow Vygotskian, I agree. where previously gained empirical knowledge is passed down. Okay, the problem with that definition is that there is a lot of knowledge that is not empirical, such as the previously mentioned pure mathematics. And people will argue that no, you can obviously teach pure mathematics to other people. So why do we need to hold ourselves to only empirical knowledge? Empirical and epistemological? Epistemological being the philosophical study of knowledge. So, for Rupert, education is closely tied to what can be known. Yeah, no, I mean, it's fine. The problem, what we're facing with is the fact that thinking about education is difficult. And let's remind ourselves how we got here. We got here because we want to argue that AI tools should not be used in educational spaces. So in order to make this claim, we need to have a working idea of what an educational space is. And in order to have an idea of what an educational space is, we need to know, or at least have an idea of what education is. So without having a firm grasp on the concepts, we are getting nowhere. Thus, my ultimate technique shows its true power. Logical analysis forces us to contend with concepts. It forces us to grasp things in a clear and concise manner. We need to understand what we're talking about. We need to understand the underlying concepts. And that is a philosophical need. Because one of the ways I understand philosophy is that philosophy is a study of concepts in the most general way of what it is to be a concept. So, in order to speak clearly, we need to know how to manage concepts. And this back and forth we've been having, that is one of the many tools we have for dealing with concepts. And that is philosophy. So, true to my catchphrase, I've gotten you too into philosophy. We always need to do some philosophy. Always. It is inescapable. Because we always need to work with concepts. Now, we can work with concepts unconsciously or consciously. And if we want to know what we're talking about, if we want to make actual claims, if we want to understand each other, we need to deal with concepts consciously. Which is what we're talking about. If we do not engage with the concepts consciously, we are not entering that phase of cognitive load. Unless you have an existential thirst or need to find the answer of what is a concept, what is education, for example, you will eventually have to settle with an answer that is good enough. How do you know when it's good enough? I cannot tell you a priori. Like, I cannot tell you right now in the abstract. Yeah, go drink some water, Setter. Get hydrated. So the problem with your definitions is not that they are wrong, is that they carry too much content, more than we need for the sake of this essay. And a stronger definition requires more backing. And that will derail the essay, because we ultimately want to talk about AI tools. We just need a good enough conceptualization for this part. People who wish to learn are guided by an expert, commonly called teacher or professor, or the people learning study previously encoded information through text or audio or even a game. Another way to frame the concept is, what happens after you're educated? What are the results of education? You can say the results of education are varied and include, but are not limited to, developing practical skills, acquiring information that is memorized and integrated in the psyche of the student. What other results of education can you think of, Chad? The transference of previous lessons to broader areas of application. Abstracting and paraphrasing. In summary, you can say that education increases the capacity to act and process for the student. See, by framing it this way, Rupert, by framing it this way, Setter, we have avoided the problem of saying, avoiding bad outcomes. Water everywhere, but nothing to drink? What do you mean? What's wrong with your water, Setter? I made so many choice? Oh no! Analysis paralysis! Hey, as long as you end up hydrated, that's good enough. Okay, so we have a more or less useful understanding of education. Now, what other elements do we need to study? Okay, so AI tools. What are AI tools? Okay, chat, do you have like a answer to this question? What are AI tools? With or without AI definition? We start with the general and then we go to a specific. The term we use is AI tools, so it's all together. What are AI tools? Then we'll go into AI. A language learning model that churns out predigested responses in a chat box. That is a very practical definition, but it is not useful in an academic setting. That is a notion that guides you in your social life. That is basically the social use of AI tools, but we need to be more clear if you want to argue this point. Where is the microplastic stored in? That's well known. In the balls. That's not a joke, by the way. Microplastics are stored in the balls. Hi, Adorn. We're writing an essay. We're writing an essay where our main thesis is AI tools should not be used in educational spaces. And we are using the technique of logical analysis to break down the conclusion into parts we can understand. So right now we're asking ourselves, what do we mean when we say AI tools? And our first answer is a language learning model that churns out predigested responses in a chat box. That definition is good enough for a social setting or a social guidance, but it's not very useful in an academic setting or in order to prove a point. It uses a lot of words that are not useful to make a statement. Remember that, Rupert? Churns out and predigested are not literal empirical things we can go and check. Hello, Renri. Yeah, also, a language learning model is only a certain type of AI tool. Yes, Renri is correct. LLMs are a subcategory of AI tools. So just answering what a subcategory does not answer the general question of what are AI tools. So, how do we answer this question? If we don't know, we don't know. That's fine. We go ask someone who knows. For AI tools, for the term used by the capitalist machine of doom, AI is everything that is programmed to process a lot of information from the internet and eliminate unwanted information from the prompt it was given. As for the tools, that will depend on the prompt and the type of output needed, like pictures, text, or even video. Okay, we're getting there. The problem with that is that that is a critical definition. That is a definition we use to criticize the use, and we should start with a more neutral technical term. Thankfully, we can ask someone who knows. Who knows? Me! We can check this post. Who's me? Me! As in me, all along. I recently went over some old notes of mine about so-called AI, in which I am reminded AI is not a well-defined research program, much less a strictly defined suite of programming tools. Basically, people have been calling AI anything the MIT labs, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and similar have tried on the way of getting AI, without quotes. How long have you known this, me? That's a really difficult question. I am not sure if I know myself, but I try. This, of course, has helped the marketing coup from tech bro shitlords. Since what is AI is vague at the programming level, they can call pretty much anything they want AI. It's a completely ruined term. But what happens when you want to enforce certain kinds of contracts around the use of AI? How exactly do you enforce a ban on AI-generated content when a term AI is bullshit? What most people mean by AI these days is machine learning and its subsets. And machine learning is, once the mystification is gone, a way of creating weighted stochastic functions on a search tree. There we go. So copy, and we'll keep reading. If you're petulant enough... Oh, wait, I have been reading without... There we go. I've been quoting myself. If you're petulant enough, one can call Eliza AI-generated content. By Eliza here, I mean the actual chatbot from the 60s, not the game by Zachtronics, which we played. Even though it is an innocuous program. Or how about Markov chains, which, while not machine learning, can be used to generate text. Caves of Code, which is an amazing game, uses Markov chains to generate to great effect, but nobody is saying we'll call it AI-generated content. A lot of the same tools used by bad AI are using procedural generation, texturing animation engines that try to simulate physics, and they use math that could be called AI because they are a form of machine learning. Because the only real criteria for calling a program AI is if it was a tool developed by teams trying to produce actual AI. If you want to ban all AI-generated content, you will have to ban a lot of movies that got made before the current AI shit boom. Which I guess is doable, but isn't that just panicking and overcorrecting what is, in the end, empty marketing verbiage? So, the problem with the question then is that AI tools is a vague term. I will not be able to define AI tools because it is an inherently flawed notion. That's why the question is flawed. I will never be able to answer this effectively. So if I cannot answer the question straight on, I need to explain what is going on. And this will force me to rewrite my conclusion. The notion of AI tools is difficult to define. Yeah, exactly, Renry. When you have a definition that overlaps too much, that is a bad definition. The ideal form of a definition is that you say of the thing exactly what it is and completely delineate it from what it is not. But that is not always possible. Again, it is a problem of knowing what is good enough. What we can do instead of solving this question is show why it is so problematic. It's difficult to define. Taken literally, AI means artificial intelligence. That implies an independent thinking self. So far, that is not the case. We have not built actual artificial intelligence. What we now call AI refers to a set of programs and services that use technology, they use programming techniques developed in the pursuit of actual AI. Now I'm gonna share the other thing, the other commentary about AI from this presentation. I think I'm gonna have to shrink my... There we go. No, what did I do? No, panic. No, wait. I just need to do this instead. Professional streamer, everyone. Professional streamer. This slide posed several interesting questions. The history of so-called AI has had different moments. There was the initial bloom in the 50s and 60s, then there was a winter, then there was another boom in the 80s, then there was another winter, and then we are in the third generation of AI, so-called AI. Okay, Sarah, I'm gonna say Mana. I'm gonna say that to Mana and see what she thinks. The core programming technology behind autocomplete is fundamentally the same as ChatGPT. They are both next token predictors. The difference is the amount of networks being processed at the moment and the sophistication of the core programming techniques. But the technology is the same. It's a technology that has existed since the 60s. We do not call autocomplete AI. We do not call the motion sensor that opens the doors in a mall or a store AI, even though those were technologies developed in the pursuit of AI. Rupert provides a colorful but valid answer. AI is a label that is a marketing egregore fentanyled into existence by the tech demons, human centipeding the worst ideas imaginable between each other. Yes, very evocative and very emotionally useful, but we cannot use that in an essay. We need to process that into something we can write and explain and present to others, because while I do understand and enjoy the figure of speech of tech demons, human centipeding the worst ideas imaginable to each other, that is not something that can be shared outside our context. So we want to use much simpler language. Okay, we'll use it in my game. Go ahead, Rupert. Go ahead. That's great. So we need to be more specific. What do we mean when we say AI tools? So what we mean when we say AI tools is what are the services called such in the current third wave generation of AI research. They are not AI. Even more specifically, we mean large language model generator services such as ChatGPT, Cloud, or Grok. Is that a functional definition? Is that good enough for everyone on chat? Oh, wait, I still have this thing. There we go. Brock or Boomer. Thus, we are faced with a problem in our essay. When someone wants to incorporate AI tools into education, They need to be explicit about what tools they wish to introduce. AI, as it currently exists, is a marketing term. I could go for a honey mustard pretzel and coleslaw right now. That is the weirdest way I've seen of spelling coleslaw. But then again, it's English language, so who cares? Okay, so we have defined 2 of the 3 initial elements that we found troubling. Now we just need the middle part, which is the most difficult. Should not. How do we argue for a should? How do we say or tell someone they should or should not do something? How can we provide reasons for doing or not doing something? In order to do that, we need to engage not with facts, but with values. What is valuable? What is useful? Thankfully, we have some of that in our definition of education. We have written previously that education should increase the capacity to act and process for the students. That moved us from the world of facts to the world of values, of claims about what we should and shouldn't do. So, in order to argue about what education should or should not do, we need to find common values. What is a good or bad education? What values do we project onto the educational process? Most of the world has educational institutions. Bad bot, bad. Okay, the bots have been slain. Back to this. So, where do we find values about education? Yep. Providing education to humans necessary for them to survive a complex and informationally dense social reality is evident. Institutional education should, at the very least, notice how I introduce the modal verb should. I am no longer talking about what is, but what should be. Which is philosophically risky, but fuck it. Provide the cognitive tools for humans to interface with their immediate society and operate abstract systems such as what's the term used for when you know how to read? Analfabeto is the opposite in Spanish. Literate? Being functionally literate. Finding sustenance, usually through paid labor. Solving conflicts with other people in non-violent manner. Okay, so we now have a general idea of what we expect from an education. Now that we have this, we can go back to our initial statement, and we have broken down the part. So when we say AI tools should not be used, when we say AI tools, we mean the current third generation technologies hyped by marketing that tend to be large language model generative programs. Those things go against the bare minimum of what we expect from a functional education in a social setting. And therefore, we should not use them in educational spaces, which are social spaces in which education, which is the passing down through guided processes of skills and abilities, takes place. By breaking down our main thesis, we have an argument. It is much easier to make the bridge from the premises to the conclusion once it has been properly broken down. That's why it is my ultimate secret technique. Yeah, well, the skill of finding research information, that takes much more time. That takes, sadly, years. That is why researchers are paid. It is not something I can teach right away. And even then, I can only teach that research skill in a very narrow area. That is philosophy. Okay, so now that we have done that work, we can finally go back to the introduction and start writing. Okay. What will we do? In this essay, Samuel and chat, we will... What are we trying to do here? To dissuade, which is the opposite of persuade. The use of AI tools in educational spaces, both formal and informal, by AI tools, which we will argue is a vague term that serves a marketing purpose and not a descriptive one. We mean third generation programs developed the pursuit of a theoretical artificial intelligence. Specifically, we mean services such as, I can just copy paste. From various scientific studies and by analyzing the core computational limitations of these so-called AI tools, we will try and provide sufficient reasons for the self-conscious teacher to not use those tools in the classroom, nor should any students use them if their goal is self-edification. The goal is to grow in skill and understanding of the subject matter. Such generators can produce viable works to bypass an educational, bypass a test or measure, but will show that these weekends this is about of the cognitive process of learning involved in learning stops the student from developing tangible skills. Okay, we have an introduction. Okay, chat, what is the problem? The problem, bluntly put, is that AI tools, and every time I say AI tools, we now mentally understand them to be third generation large language model generative programs. See, by placing that in introduction, we're doing the opposite of logical analysis. We're going in the other direction. We have established the simple, and now we have condensed a large string of information into a shorter name, but that is composed of more complex parts. I've been pushed. Let me find exactly. There's a so-called university that only uses AI. Oh my god, I found a Redditor saying that universities should be run purely by AI. Wahahaha. Okay. I'm gonna slander my own university. Because fucking that's why. I'm being pushed in several top universities, including the alma mater of this essay's author, UNAM. So I'm gonna. I have a link, so I'm gonna insert footnote. No, not footer, footnote. And I put the link here. It said. I'm gonna put the link here. There we go. And that's a footnote. See? So I am no longer pulling that claim out of my ass. I have provided evidence that yes, at least one major university is pushing the use of AI as educational tools. Specifically, Mexico's top university, the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Okay, why is this a problem, chat? Like, notice I'm asking something very specific. I am not saying why this is wrong. I am not saying why. Let's refute this. That's for the conclusion. Something being a problem doesn't mean it's bad. It means literally that it is a problem. The use of AI reduces brain cells? Not exactly. We'll go over the evidence and we'll show that it is not that it makes, like, reduces brain cells. It stops you from forming the connections necessary to learn a skill. Instead of refuting, let's think about the risks. Why would this be a risk? Okay. This poses a risk. These tools can be used poorly and allow students to skip the process in which they would otherwise develop the the personal skills they need for being their future labors. Is that a good enough paraphrasing of what you said, Renry? Is that valid? The RLHF phase. Okay, what do you mean by RLHF phase? Reinforcement learning with human feedback. Okay, thank you, yes. Okay, what other risk do you see? Okay, here's one. Another possible risk is that these tools carry a massive energy and ecological cost, making them an added stressor for current critical struggle against global fucking warming. Come on, chat. This is where you come up with your ideas or your intuitions about what is at risk. We need to put those fears and that disgust into words. Do you think that someone that goes to university to study art should use AI tools as part of their training? There's the enormous number of coding errors. Okay, very interesting, Rupert. For students of computer science, the practice of vibe coding okay, those are great points. Let me go one by one. For students of computer science, the practice of vibe coding generates enormous errors, bugs, and programming inefficiencies. Okay, Rupert, you have homework, and your homework is to find a source that corroborates your claim. Okay? You need to find at least one example of this, which should not be difficult. You can look for the Claude code leak. Plenty of examples there. Renry, opinions can be skewed by the personal biases of who trained the model. That's a great point. Since this, yet another risk is that since these tools, no, Setter, I'm going to refute that claim. That is not true. Setter, remember that calculators, what we now call calculators, are better known as electromechanical calculators. And before those existed, calculators were humans. Humans in a room with pen and paper. There simply came a point in which raw arithmetic calculation is too much for the human mind. Yep, Renry provides a very good counterargument. Remember this, we will use this later. Can I put the source link in the chat here? Yes! Let me see if I can make Nightbot less jealous because, I mean, Nightbot blocks links. With reason, because most links are spam. Try putting them on chat and I'll tell you what happens. Okay, Setter. See, that's a very important caveat, because as the main study will go over shows, the timing on which you use LLMs changes the effect drastically. Using calculators during elementary is very different than using calculators in general. I'm sorry, Setter. I'm sorry I'm such a hard ass, but I have like very strong standards that were beaten into me over 11 years of doing this shit. So I do tend to be, yeah, very strong about this. No, the Nightbot. No, don't be bad. Okay, I need to chat moderation. Settings. Okay, I know I have now told Nightbot to chill. Let me do something to some of y'all. Community, roles manager. Sorry, Rupert. I'm gonna let you post links as soon as I give you a role. Or you know what? Fuck it. Look, let me just tell. Okay. You can now post links. I'm sorry. Do you have a personal Discord server? Not yet. Not yet. Once I have a debut, I'll guess I'll make one. But for now, no. I'm sorry, Rupert. You can post the links now. Okay, back to this. I have the link, so I can see the moderated messages. So I have the link, Rupert. Don't worry. Okay. Yeah, Rupert got timed out. I'm sorry. Okay, we're going back to the problematization. We had Renry's. Yeah, the skewed opinion. Okay. Another risk is that these tools are programs. They obey the interests and goals of their owners. They can be programmed to be biased in as shown by Musk's shoddy attempts at handling rock. Okay, after that we have another Setter says, future generations are going to be so reliant on AI to the point where they will find critical thinking to be useless. That is an alarmist take, which we cannot defend. That is too strong for this essay. But what we can say is that these services, if relied upon, can be a tremendous liability, as we've seen recently. Claude and with OpenAI's shutdown of Sora and Claude's recent. Is it Claude or Gemini that now has tokens? Yeah, Claude. It was Claude. Recent imposition of costly prompt tokens per prompt. There we go. If people become reliant on these tools to work, then the companies that own them can become rentier middlemen. Of a captive audience. Okay, so we have a series of problems, which are broad and many of them go beyond the scope of this essay, but they are related. So we have shown why is this a thing? Why are we going to care about this? So these are the general problems, but we're going to specifically talk about education. So how do we translate this to the main body, which is education? I think Rupert's still on timeout. Can I un-timeout Rupert? Let me check. There we go, yeah. I removed the timeout. Okay, so how do we translate? I'm gonna take a shower so I could restart my brain. Yeah, go ahead, Setter. Okay, here's where I'm gonna use another technique. This is not like my ultimate secret technique. In fact, it is very old. We can use a rhetorical technique used by Aristotle. Let's take the posture of someone else. Okay, we have presented a series of problems, but what would someone who believes in introducing AI to the classroom, what would the posture say or think about? One common counter-argument would be the following. Many of these risks are not intrinsic. For example, if the algorithms used were more efficient, it is theoretically possible that we could have the same functionality of generator programs without their massive ecological cost. If a service is biased, there are open source alternatives such as DeepSeek that could avoid that conflict of interest. What other counter argument can you think about, chat? Furthermore, the idea of a completely unbiased education is problematic in itself. Teachers, books, and culture in general is also capable of bias. And yet, we use all of those. Yet, those are all parts of the educational process. Some people find this practice very difficult. I do not. I do not understand that not understanding. I have a voice in my mind that screams at me every time I could be wrong. And no, that's not just anxiety. It's more compulsive than that. I have been trained by life and by my own compulsions to try and think of, okay, how could this possibly be false? What can potentially refute this? It's a very paranoid practice. And I know not everyone can do it. I don't know. It's difficult for me to put myself in that mind space. But at least try it a little bit. Try to imagine, okay, I already made some claims. What would a potential opponent say against this? And that serves to make my arguments even stronger. It helps me sharpen and find what exactly I want to say in a way that is both stronger and more convincing. In order to establish my point, I need to make a general analysis of these tools in the most optimal of conditions. I need to argue against the very use of AI tools in the classroom without any tertiary or accidental negative. So what we've done here is walk the audience first through a list of possible concerns they may have, and use the practice of imagining a counter opponent to sharpen our critique. To say, okay, yeah, several of those concerns are valid, but they could be fixed under some other conditions. So instead of relying upon these accidental negatives, let's go to the core of the issue. Let's take AI tools in their best and strongest and most efficient facet and argue against that. That is called steel manning, which is the opposite of straw manning. When you strawman someone, you are taking the shittiest version of their argument and beat that. And we're not going to do that. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to take the strongest possible version, the idealized version of AI tools, and say, even that version is bad. Okay, Rupert, sorry the bot got a little bit jealous. You can post links now. I already got your link, so don't worry. Okay? So now that we have presented our introduction and our problematization, yeah, I got the link, thank you. And yeah, everyone on chat can check it. We are going to go to the main body problem, where we examine all of our sources and try to build an argument from them. As we've mentioned, we found that a really good study, thanks to the news, thanks Science Communication, and here we have it in one of our many tabs. And I have selected a series of quotes or blocks that we can mine for premises. Let's see another interesting one. One of the most prominent effects of using AI in writing is a shift in how students engage with the material. Generative AI can generate content on demand, offering students quick drafts based on minimal input. While this can be beneficial in terms of saving time and offering inspiration, it also impacts students' ability to retain and recall information, a key aspect of learning. When students rely on AI to produce lengthy or complex essays, they may bypass the process of synthesizing information from memory, which can hinder their understanding and the retention of the material. For instance, while ChatGPT significantly improved short-term tasks performance, such as essay scores, it did not lead to a significant differences in knowledge gain or transfer. This suggests that while AI tools can enhance productivity, they may also promote a form of metacognitive laziness. I love that term! I love metacognition! Metacognition, for those who don't know, is the skill and practice of thinking about your own thinking. Where students offload cognitive and metacognitive responsibilities to the AI, potentially hindering their ability to self-regulate and engage deeply with the learning material. AI tools that generate essays without prompting students to reflect or revise can make it easier for students to avoid the intellectual effort required to internalize key concepts, which is crucial for long-term learning and knowledge transfer. My therapist has been getting me a bit on metacognizing as of late. It's hard. Yeah, but it's so worth it, my dude! It's really good! Okay, so look at this. We have an really strong paragraph from this study that is rigorous and offers very strong empirical evidence that helps with our claims. That's a good paragraph. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, let's get on all the metacognitive train. Hell yeah! Okay. No, that's... I wouldn't look at that. That's my university being stupid shit. I mean, I do like the idea of teaching people the foundations of so-called AI. But not because they're gonna help you with finance or whatever. This. Okay. Here we have another study on cognitive offloading and AI. I got this from the bibliography of our main study. It's good for being a litigating AI combating prosecutor or some such. Yeah, no, that I completely disagree. First of all, law in this country is a fucking joke. And second, applying law in a meaningful way requires sensitivity to context, which is something that LLMs cannot have. Ah, no, this is the one I wanted. My bad. So, okay, we went over a paragraph that says, okay, maybe AI is a trade-off between efficiency at the cost of cognitive depth, but not really. Turns out that surprisingly, we find that allowing AI actually increases completion time by 19%. AI tools slow developers down. Now, these are different tasks, so I cannot just say that, oh yeah, AI will always make it slower. But it does mean that the burden of proof of showing that you gain efficiency at the cost of cognitive offloading is on part of the AI people. There is at least one counterexample to the idea that using AI will always make you work faster. Not really. And that is also that also has to do with Setter's concern about calculators. If you know how to properly use a calculator, it is always faster than doing things by hand. So in the case of the calculator, the efficiency gain is much stronger than in the case of AI. In the case of AI, it is spurious at best. This is the same as that, just with graphs. This is cool, but it's not going to help us. Okay. So we have some sources to help us guide our conclusion. How do we actually start creating that? Okay. We have some ground covered. We have talked about. Okay, I can delete this. I can also delete this. how do we start laying down the elements that will allow us to reach our conclusion? Remember that the conclusion is AI tools should not be used in educational spaces. Okay. This analysis we just made, we need to insert it somewhere in the main body. So first, let's make sure that we actually argue for this. Okay, so we need to make sure right now at this point that we have a precise and functional definition of AI tools. So in order to argue against AI tools, it is necessary to sorry, brain a little dry. Clarify that term as best we can. This is made more difficult because the notion of AI tools has been taken over by a marketing, techno industrial gold rush. Taken literally, AI means artificial intelligence. That implies an independent thinking self. So far, that is not the case. We have not built actual artificial intelligence. What we now call AI refers to a set of programs and services that use programming techniques developed in the pursuit of actual AI. These are a subset of the larger programming field of machine learning. So what we mean when we say AI tools are the services called such in the current third wave generation of AI research. They are not AI understood as actual artificial intelligence. As mentioned previously, we mean large language model generator services such as GPT. Okay, great. So now we have in our main text what we mean when we say AI tools. What other information do we need to put in order for this paragraph to make sense? it is not explicit, but I mean, it may sound silly, but do you all think that synthesizing information, memorizing and internalizing concepts are important parts of education? Yeah, I mean, it sounds intuitively obvious, but Henry says, I don't think it's the concepts as much as the skills. So, skills and concepts. Yeah, just, there you go. We need to explain or a bit of what qualities we expect from education in order for that paragraph to make sense. Let's go back to what we wrote about education. Education is a vast and complex activity that is done by various creatures, most notably humans. I don't want to be too anthropocentric. We know that crows, elephants, and a bunch of apes engage in educational practices. Also, humans to other animals. So we're not going to solve the problem of education as a whole, but we need to introduce enough concepts in order to make sense of the paragraph we have that we really want to quote. But we do need a notion that is both simple and effective to study, to study the problem in this essay. Education is the guided process of learning. So we suggest that education is the guided process of learning. Education is a social and political activity in which either the people who wish to learn are guided by an expert, commonly called teacher or professor, or the people learning study previously encoded information through text or audio or even a game. The results of the education are varied and include, but are not limited to, developing practical skills, which is what Henry mentioned, acquiring information that is memorized and integrated in the psyche of the student, the transference of previous lessons to broader areas of application. Or, to name a few cases. In summary, we can say that education increases the capacity to act and process the cognitive processes of the student. Okay. Now we have a better segue into this paragraph. Oh shit. Once again, professional streamer, everyone. Okay, so that is our text so far. We want to introduce this paragraph. What other element do we need to make sense of this? Basically, what do we expect? What basic general skills do we expect from students in order for them to learn? We're running a bit late on time. I really want this to be on YouTube, so I'm gonna go a bit faster. Yeah, okay, understanding and thinking, but that is too broad. We need to be more specific. So the issue here is, how do you measure learning? How do you know when a teacher is actually successfully educating other people. There are many schools of that. The behaviorist school says that education succeeds when people are able to engage in new behaviors, such as doing tasks they couldn't do before. Exam outcomes are not a goal, they are a way of measuring that goal. You still need to understand, for example, if you're a behaviorist, your exam should be a task that is a safe version of the skill you wish to teach. For example, if you're teaching mechanics, an exam of that will be fixing a car in a safe setting. Let's go back to our source. The processes that these people call attention to are synthesizing information, task performance, like actually accomplishing the thing, knowledge gain or transfer, the ability to self-regulate, internalizing concepts. Those are all highly abstracted skills, mental processes. So this study is in the cognitive school of pedagogy, implicitly or explicitly. The question I take, chat. Do you think, chat, that education should cultivate the internal mental processes of the student? Is that a concern as part of the educational process? Or should we just focus on outward measurable behavior? Rupert says yes. It is important for more efficiency. What is more important for more efficiency? Outward behavior ends up with the current grades-based system. Not good. That's a good point. What did I do? What did I do with the music? Did I grab my own music? There we go. Changing the way the student learner, the way of thinking. Okay, so both of you conceive that this internal cognitive level is an important part of education. It's not just about getting the student to reproduce certain behavior. See, that is an assumption we tend to have, but we don't usually make it explicit. Sometimes, actually a lot of times, writing out what we perceive to just be obvious or common sense reveals it to be much more complex than we initially thought or suspected. So we're gonna use this part of our analysis about the Schultz. In theory, the whole point of students making a thesis is for them to use or reproduce skills in a uniquely creative way in their respective fields. Yeah, Setter says, it's also valuable for a student to think outside the box because they might find a more advanced way to produce the same results. Yeah, that is called transferable domain knowledge. And that is when you can use the tools to do one thing in another completely different setting. And AI is particularly ass at doing that. So we're going to take our analysis we made previously about what are the goals of education. And we're going to start for the most obvious. We need education at least to let people survive in an urban setting. And that involves a lot of cognitive processes. And because the world is so vast and so complex, we need to foment those internal cognitive skills so they can have transferable domain knowledge. So let's write that in a more accessible language. Okay. Now we can introduce our quote. Let's talk about the project first. Different conditions. A group, the same tasks were given to 3 groups. One with no digital resource tools available. One with search program, web search algorithms, and one who could only use the LLM ChatGPT. The results of this study led them to many interesting conclusions, notable among them being there we go. Okay, so this is a block quote in the text. So we indented it, but we need to indent it better. I don't know what's going on. I guess I'll have to do this. And we're also gonna shrink the text a little bit, which means, okay, there's embedded. There we go. So now we have a cool quote. We're gonna erase their own footnotes and introduce ours. What am I doing here again? You're learning how to write an essay. You need to go to work in an hour. Fuck, Setter! Get something to eat and get ready and relax. You can always watch the VODs, don't worry. Ah, I've got footnote. Where's the footnote? Yeah, footnote. Having breakfast in the company? That's weird. Two entire loaves of peanut butter and jelly? Sir, that is too much. Okay, you lost a bet, but that is too much. That's too much calories, my man. That's still a lot! Like, one PB and jelly sandwich is a treat. Even for a large guy. Anyways. So, while not damning, not universal, these results indicate that as a learning tool, AI is lacking compared to other educational methods. The other I mean, still, but I mean, PB is really good for making math, so that is true. The others conjecture that consider the possibility of there being a gain in efficiency. But if we take that the goal of education is not producing text, but rather stimulating the internal cognitive capacities of the student through challenging and interesting work, it does. Whether there is gain efficiency is irrelevant. Furthermore, there are several other studies that have shown that in other tasks, not necessarily essay writing, the purported time gain through AI tools proves to be illusory. And here we put the link to that other article which I suggested. Okay, it's getting real late. We're almost going on 3 hours. I need to finish this now. So, what will the core argument be, given what we have? Premise number 1. Education has as a goal not just the measurable products or behavioral output in the students, but also the growth. Yeah, but we need the argument. How do we reach that in the conclusion? Also the growth of the student. Education should be edifying. It needs to provide people with the skills necessary to survive in our complex urban environment. No, social life. There we go. Regardless of all the other problems or benefits AI tools may or may not have, LM generators supplant the cognitive effort required for students to develop the neurological groundwork for learning and developing skills. Well, there may be. Okay, so it says, I know, Samuel, this whole subject binds me with rage because the uni I wanted to go to tore down the Department of Computer Science and Communications to build a fucking artificial intelligence departments, and I want to. TOS! For legal reasons, Setter is jorking it! We're a bunch of jokers in this chat. We are just making funny, humorous remarks with no seriousness. We're just being very sarcastic, ironic, funny man. Everyone post clown emojis. so that everyone knows we are chunkling it. Hell yeah, Rupert. I'm gonna copy and paste that. Yep, we're all chunklers. Okay, we're almost going on 3 hours. I wanted to upload this to YouTube. I'm sorry, so I'm gonna have to cut this off now. Well, I mean, for 3 hours, it's not that bad. I mean, 1, 2, 3 pages, plus bibliography, which we haven't put, but it's still there. But this counts as an essay. This is a valid college. I mean, I wouldn't call it like grad level, but yeah, I can share this document. We all did it together. Once I clean it up and add the bibliography and so on, and add some more quotes. But we really need to finish this. I'm sorry. But this counts as a pre-grad valid essay. This will get with some details, some more quotations and so on. But for 3 hours, it's not bad at all. Imagine if we had like an entire week. If we had an entire week to polish this, we could easily get an A plus or a 10 or a 100 or whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to grade it in your system. So, I hope this shows the power of logical analysis in order to make ourselves understood and understand others. If something you read is too complex, don't just get angry expecting your brain to do the thinking for you. Slowly and methodically stop and ask yourself, okay, I'm going to break this down into parts. I'm going to study what each part means until I get into a simple sentence. And then I'm going to rework and synthesize it back. So we have analysis, which we break down, and then we have synthesis, in which we build back. And in that process, in that cognitive effort, we grow to understand things, which we, as we have seen, is the very thing that AI generators rob you from doing. So if you value that part in your brain that lets you understand things, never use AI for your essays, never use AI for your thinking. And we now all know that when we say never use AI, we mean specifically third AI wave large language model generator tools. So I hope everyone has grown in understanding and skill and enjoyed this series. Read more, write more, enjoy your life more. My greatest hope is that this makes you engage with more information without this being tedious or annoying. Grok, is this true? Grok, is my boot going up Setter's ass true? Please tell me, Grok. I cannot tell for myself. Anyways, it is 9 p.m. Let me see if we have enough for a raid and for viewers. I guess we can raid. Let's see who is online. Yeah. Okay, so there's Banban that's studying Japanese. I don't know if you want more studying. I mean, you can leave if you want, but I'm gonna... Let's read Banban. if you want to keep studying. Anyways, that was all for me tonight. The entire series is gonna be on YouTube. You can watch it whenever you want. And again, if there's any doubts or things you want to know about philosophy or writing essays, you can always ask me. You can send me a message on Blue Sky or just at me. I'll see you all on Tuesday. We'll keep going with Cryptmaster. Bye bye.